pessoal, eu sou Kelvin Araújo, estamos aqui em mais um vídeo, mais uma entrevista do nosso canal, nessa série de entrevistas internacionais que a gente está fazendo, tanto aqui no nosso canal, quanto no nosso site nesse fim de ano. E antes de eu falar do que se trata um pouco da entrevista de hoje, eu peço para que vocês adotem o procedimento padrão de sempre. Abriu esse vídeo, é like imediato, se inscrevam no nosso canal caso vocês não sejam inscritos, nos acompanhem em outras redes sociais, Progland no Facebook, Prog_Land no Instagram, plataformas de áudio que, se vocês quiserem ouvir a gente, ProgTalk ou Progland, no Groover, caso você tenha uma banda ou você é algum artista e queira enviar músicas para resenhas ou conhece alguém que faça isso, nos envie para a nossa conta do Groover, Prog_Land, e por favor, nos acompanhe também no nosso site, proglandmusica.wordpress.com. Introdutório feito, eu vou falar um pouco do que foi a entrevista de hoje, mais uma entrevista muito especial no nosso canal, internacional, exclusiva ao Brasil pela primeira vez também, que a gente está promovendo aqui no nosso canal, e a última entrevista, infelizmente, no nosso canal em vídeo desse ano. Não é a última entrevista internacional do ano, a gente vai postar outras no nosso site. Só para lembrar, novamente, proglandmusica.wordpress.com. E a entrevista que a gente encerra esse ano aqui no nosso canal, não poderia ser com alguém melhor, Manfred Mann, ícone não só do rock progressivo, mas da história da música, um dos melhores tecladistas, um dos melhores arranjadores de todos os tempos, né? A entrevista dele no nosso canal não tem nenhum ponto de partida específico, não foi nada especial, né? A entrevista fala sobre toda a trajetória dele, sobre a carreira dele desde os anos 60, com a banda, com a primeira banda que ele teve, a Manfred Mann, até a Earth Band, processo de composição, processo de criação. É uma daquelas entrevistas que a gente meio que saca muito do perfil de um artista, né? É uma das raras entrevistas, uma das poucas entrevistas do Manfred até em veículos de mídia nos últimos anos, então eu espero que vocês curtam muito. Uma daquelas entrevistas em que ele fala muito sobre os grandes momentos da carreira dele, claro, muitas análises sobre o que ele é como arranjador. Ele se define como arranjador mesmo, primariamente, em vez de compositor, porque a maioria da carreira dele foi fazendo releituras de canções de outros artistas. E ele fala também do processo, dos ingredientes, entre muitas aspas, que faz ele querer trabalhar numa releitura, quais artistas ele jamais regravaria. Ele também fala isso na entrevista. Muitos detalhes também sobre a obra dele, sobre a obra até de outros artistas, influências que ele percebe. Tudo ele fala na entrevista. Foi uma entrevista muito especial aqui para o nosso canal. Eu lamento que a gente tenha conversado muito fora do ar. O Manfred foi muito solícito. Na entrevista ele parece um pouco sério, mas é porque ele é uma pessoa muito objetiva. Ele fala de uma maneira muito sem rodeios e muito honesta. Eu acho que a grande palavra dessa entrevista é honestidade, né? E eu lamento que a gente tenha conversado tanto, né? A gente conversou sobre muitas coisas que ficaram, infelizmente, fora do ar. Inclusive, um dos momentos mais descontraídos e mais legais da entrevista, eu não pude colocar a pedido do próprio Manfred, porque ele é bem crítico sobre o que ele faz e tudo mais. E teve um momento que a gente estava conversando sobre teclados, sobre sintetizadores, e ele começou a tocar na minha frente, né, demonstrando o estilo dele no synth, o que ele tenta fazer nos solos, naqueles timbres muito icônicos dos sintetizadores. Ele se auto-intitula um tocador de sintetizador em vez de um tecladista propriamente dito. E fora outros papos também, né? Infelizmente eu não pude deixar isso no ar, porque o Manfred sentiu que essas demonstrações assim eram ele fazendo alguns experimentos sonoros que ele não queria ver registrados no YouTube, porque não eram propriamente o auge da performance dele. E isso é muito do lado, como eu tô falando, sincero dele como como performer e muito analítico perante a obra que ele produz. E é grande isso, e isso é a grande tônica da entrevista. Sinceridade e muita análise, sem rodeios, sem papas na língua por parte do Manfred. Ele foi muito solícito, muito gentil, tanto dentro quanto fora do ar também. E a gente conversou bastante, até no final ele fala ele até brinca, né? Pô, quando eu já tô encerrando a entrevista já são as últimas 2 perguntas, porque a gente falou bastante, a gente ficou conversando tanto, que falou, agora a gente já tá terminando, né? E foi muito legal, foi um dos momentos mais bacanas, a gente já pode dizer que é um dos momentos mais bacanas da história desse canal. Enfim, eu espero que vocês curtam, aproveitem essa entrevista. É isso. Pessoal, estamos aqui em mais uma entrevista no nosso canal. E uma entrevista, acredito que seja inédita aqui no Brasil. Uma das entrevistas mais importantes assim, que a gente está fazendo nessa série, nesse ano. Com Manfred Mann. Thanks so much for acceptance. And I'm really thankful for having the chance to talk with you, to see you and other things. And I have a lot of themes in this talk, and my first question is about something that I couldn't let to talk. I'm really amazed by your stamina and your appearance, because you have just turned 84 years old now. And you have been a musician for at least 60 years. And watching your recent performances, I see that you play the organ, the synthesizers with more passion and dedication than ever before. And I read a recent interview by Paul Simon saying that when you get older as a musician, you have an important change going on. You go from playing faster when you were young to playing right when you are older. And maturity means that physical limitations of time force you to become more conscious and mature when it comes to the music that you play, especially a complex music that you play. And I would like to use this as a hook to my first question. And age, as in your case, was beneficial to you. And what difference do today Manfred's noticed compared to the Manfred of the past as a musician? Do you believe that you are better today? What improvements do you notice on your career today?
Well, you're making an assumption that may not be correct. I mean, I generally don't think one benefits from being older at all. I think old people, I don't believe experience is a valuable thing. I think often it can close you down to new ideas. And I think very often when people get older, they get more stupid. The idea that they automatically become more intelligent. Nobody goes to an old age home to get advice.
Oh, you don't think that, even in your case, you don't think there's nothing, in one point, nothing
No,
beneficial?
I don't think there's anything that came with age at all. I struggle all the time, and I learn things of how to play and how to use the instrument. I'm learning it all the time and trying to find better ways to do it. And most of my life I just played. Now I try and play with my hands much more relaxed than they used to be, because I think you play faster and more accurately if you have relaxed hands. So the idea of playing with lots of energy is not a good thing if you've got unnecessary tension, because energy and tension can be the same thing. And you can see it in lots of players where they're hammering the thing and doing all that. It looks good and looks great. But sometimes the really great players, like, say, George Benson on guitar, they look very relaxed. And so I learned things like that. I don't think that's anything that comes with age. It's just having been around, and also with lots of people teaching on YouTube. And I often try and look to see if there's things I can learn. And I learned, for example, that, well, maybe it's wrong to try and play with your fingers. when you're playing a keyboard, whereas if you moved your hand from side to side, rotation, your fingers hardly need move at all. So those are the kind of things I learn. And also that if you want to really play properly from your soul, you should sing it rather than play it with your fingers, because your fingers will go to predetermined patterns that you've learned. Whereas if you sing, in a sense, your brain is the thing. I don't mean soul, it sounds too pretentious. But if you play with your brain finds the word, finds the notes rather than your fingers. It's obviously your fingers are also doing it, that you get closer to who you are as a person, as a player. I don't think that's a question of age, that you somehow get some maturity and wisdom. I have never found older people to be actually wiser than younger people. They may just have more information clogging their brains, that's all.
You were talking about the exercise of playing keyboards and the patterns, the cares about when you play such complex parts of the keyboards. And do you have any kind of exercises for it? Because I was really amazed by how well you were playing, in the recent performances.
Well, it's kind of difficult. I realized the difference between, say, a classical musician and, in a sense, a jazz musician, although I'm not playing jazz as such, but you're improvising all the time. One of the differences is that the poor classical players have to write what Rachmaninoff wrote. That's really difficult. Or what Chopin wrote. That's really difficult stuff. If you're a pop rock player, you can cheat. So you learn off a few things really well, and you practice them and you practice them and you practice them. Say in the last few years, I started practicing pentatonic scales. They're very simple things, but to play them well is quite difficult. So you practice them, you practice them, you practice them. And then when you need to play something really fast, you can go to what you did, not what Johann Sebastian Bach wrote. You can cheat as a jazz musician and a pop musician, so improvising, you can cheat. It's much, much easier. And I looked at some of the people, I won't say their names, but I looked at them and I thought, gee, these guys have just learnt off some tricks. I was always trying to be able to play everything. Anything that's in your head, you should be able to play. That's true, but I've now realized you can cheat a bit. So you learn off a few licks here and there, and then when you want to go, you go flashing all fast round it. But you couldn't touch the knees of a classical musician.
Yeah.
They have to play the stuff that these brilliant guys wrote. That's almost impossible. I mean, the technical standards of classical musicians is horrendously high. So I've learned off a load of tricks, really, but also by keeping one's hands relaxed. I am recently playing much better than I have for some years. I suppose that's true. I don't know whether it's maturity. I think you've got to keep working at it and never think that you're so clever that you've learnt it all and that you know it all. So I keep, and the only person who knows how useless I feel I really am is my wife, because she hears me struggling all the time. So I think I am playing well lately, but I'm not sure it's, I'm still struggling. There are people I see their hands moving on the keyboard, and I think, I can't get my hand to move that fast, never mind on the keyboard. I don't know how they do it, but there are people, Jordan Rudess is one. I don't know how he plays at that speed. It's just ridiculous. At speed and accuracy. It's not just speed.
Yes, it's a great point. And you were talking now about the influence that classical music had on your life. And
no, it's not an influence at all. I just can't do it well enough. It's not an influence. I don't play classical music very much. I play some Bach and simple exercises, but really it's not an influence at all. And I think learning classical music as a young musician is a big, big mistake, because all the accents and all the feeling in classical music is generally on the beat. But it isn't do da do da ba 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 do da 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 da. That's totally different. And then as a kid, you sort of, if you play that all the time, it does hamper you playing with groove. But the great players, Oscar Peterson learned classical music. When people are that good, it didn't seem to matter. They're great musicians. But a lot of people I hear playing, they play really well. And I hate to use color here, but mainly white musicians often play dup da dup da dup da diddly dup da dup da dup. They don't play do ba dup do ba 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 da do da do. They go do ba do da do da diddly do da do da do da diddly 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 do da do da do. Very good, but all on the beat. And I think play classical music really a lot as a kid. And if that's the first music you hear in your family, I don't think it's helpful.
But I was assuming that because wrongly, and I'm really happy that you correct me, because many musicians, a lot of musicians actually say, "Oh, my origins is in classical music, and classical music is all that I ever got to hear when I was a child, when I was 7 years old," and it kills. I don't know if I suppose that you probably will agree with that, but I think that the exaggeratedly study on classical music kills a lot of creativity of the musicians, because you all the time you have to read music and you're not trying to all the time create new music beyond that. I think it's in a certain ways it kills a lot of creativity. And when
the creativity is in Chopin and the art is in playing Chopin beautifully. And I wouldn't say that one can so easily just discount 500 years of great music, because it's a different thing. If you're improvising, it's a different thing. It's a different kind of creativity. I really don't know. I mean, it's easy to say that. Of course, they're just reading music. But I find it difficult to criticize people who can do things that I can't do. So I can't read that well. I can't play that well. Well, it would be easy to say, oh, they're not really creative. They're not really making it up. I'm part of the creative community. But that's pretentious and just trying to make. Yeah, it's all right for you to say that, but if I said that, I'd consider myself really arrogant.
Yeah, I understand your point. And you were talking a little bit of your origins, of how did the music had come to your life. And I would like to know more about that. And did you originally left Johannesburg during the end of the 50s, early 60s, during apartheid, all the things that were going on back then, unfortunately, to start writing for a newspaper? But you were already playing back then. You started your...
Well, yes. I mean, I started playing when I left when I was nearly 21, and I started playing when I was 5 or 6. There was a piano in the house. My mother played classical piano, and so there was a piano there. So I fiddled around on a piano from a very early age. All I had to do was walk across the room and there was a piano. So I landed up playing, just fiddling around playing piano. By the time I left in 1961, I was already sort of an adult, really. I'd been playing for years, but kind of inadequately, with very little knowledge. But playing jazz, and I was only interested in jazz. When I left South Africa to go to England, it was only jazz I was interested in. The pop rock thing came much later. Well, not much later, 2 or 3 years later.
And back then, exactly when you left Johannesburg to England, in which exact moment you thought, I will make a living from music?
Well, when I decided, I mean, a lot of us, it wasn't just me, but a group of our friends, we all wanted to leave South Africa because we didn't want to live there anyway. So to be a musician, I never really thought I could earn a living as a musician ever, in the beginning at all. But I thought you have to at least try. You don't want to, in the end, say, oh, well, I've done the sensible thing, become a lawyer or become a green selling fruit or whatever. But I never even tried. So the only reason I went is I thought, you've got to at least try. So I did go to try to be a musician. But I was working for my father as a printer. And then one day I just decided, well, I used to practice to find a piano in my lunch hour in central Johannesburg, and I practiced for an hour, and then I knocked off work, asked my father if I could leave at 4, and then I might practice for 2 hours a day, from 4:30 to 6:30, and then go home. And then I just obviously improved enough and decided I would at least try. But I don't think I would have succeeded as a jazz musician in the end. The success came from, in the end, my ability, which is a strange one, it's not a standard one, is my ability to hear songs and to recognize there's something about me that's can recognize a pop, something that's hooky and that's catchy as pop music. And I either developed that or I had that, and I think that's the reason I succeeded. But the thing I'm most interested in really is playing the keyboard. But I'm not playing organ, by the way. You said earlier on organ. I'm not a very good organ player. I'm playing synthesizer.
I love that definition that you consider yourself as a synthesizer player, not a regular keyboard player, because
that's
there's
absolutely, yeah, because there are a lot of players on synthesizer better than me, but I do have a style, at least in concerts, I don't know whether it's on record, that sounds like me. And so I don't sound like other people because I play slightly differently. And I phrase often with more space within it. And, I'm just playing with more space. And also I'm bending notes downwards. Most people bend notes upwards. So just the very small things, I have a kind of trademark in the way I play. But that's purely accidental. I don't know why that is.
You used a very good word, accidental, as your beginning of your career in music, and you formed your first band, Manfred Mann, and listen to the first albums. I feel a very relaxed atmosphere in the band, and which some became a success with several hits, Do What Diddy Diddy, Pretty Flamingo, all this stuff that and did scared you at first?
Scared me? No, but when you're talking about early 60s now, sort of pop song. No, I wasn't scared. It was a time when we were a blues band. We moved from jazz, Mike Hugg and myself, we moved from jazz to kind of rhythm and blues. And we had a very big hit record in the UK called 54321, which was to do with a very successful TV show. So that helped us be successful, and we wrote it ourselves. Then the second record was a really bad record. We also wrote it quickly. and I realized that, and suddenly this big career, which you imagined you were very successful and famous and stuff, suddenly we were failures within 3 months of being a big success. And my own view is we're in competition at that time. You've got to remember, with the greatest pop songwriters ever, the Beatles are our competition, for God's sake. Rolling Stones writing great songs. And I didn't think that we could write songs as well as that. And so decided, and because in the 1950s, Frank Sinatra didn't write his own songs. Louis Armstrong didn't write, the great people didn't write their own songs. Even Miles Davis's early work in jazz, he was doing standards written. Most jazz musicians were playing mostly, not necessarily bebop and Charlie Parker, but a lot of them were playing songs that had been written for musicals in the 30s and 40s, 20s and 30s and 40s. So for me to do other people's songs was Ray Charles, a lot of the time, didn't write his own stuff, you know. And the Beatles came and everyone became a writer. But for me, it didn't matter. I wasn't that bothered because I was, beforehand, we were doing blues. We were playing Chuck Berry songs. It didn't matter to me. So we changed then to become a pop group and finding other material which we didn't write. And I became the band as well. It's not just me, the whole band was doing it, but we became arrangers rather than writers. But in the early 60s, that's almost considered you're not a real artist. See, because almost like what you were saying about classical music, well, somebody else wrote the song, somebody else, it means something to somebody else. And a lot of songs we did, I don't know what it means. Do What Did He doesn't have any big, massive meaning. There she was walking down the street singing Do What Did He, for sake. It's not meaningful. We're not trying to change society. And there's everybody now, because journalists like to write, they're punks against conventional capitalist society. They're fighting for I'm a musician. And I'm not trying to make statements. I'm not trying to change the world. And some of the best records are just records about walking down the road. I mean, Pretty Flamingo. On our block, all of the guys call it Flamingo. I mean, even Blinded by the Light. I don't even know what Blinded by the Light really means. I don't know what Mighty Quinn, Come All Without Come All. I don't know what they mean. They're not meaningful to me in that social sense, which everybody likes to write about. They've got some statements to make about society, and we represent.
It's just a song.
Well, to me, yeah, as long as it's not bad, as long as it's good musically, I can't take it seriously from a social point of view. If you're interested in the social aspects, buy a book and read philosophy, But to me, but that's just how I see it. And, I don't think in terms of, one's creative. And I don't think creative. I've met many, many really good music players who are stupid idiots. And I've met some really bad players who are wonderful people. So the sensitive musician is often the drunk arsehole in the bar after the gig. I wouldn't think sensitive musicians are necessarily sensitive human beings. It's a strange thing.
Yeah, it has the differences on it, and you don't have to be a musician that everything that you do is a statement or trying to change things in society.
I don't mind. I mean, when Bob Dylan wrote a lot of protest songs, they were great songs, and they were really good. It's just that I'm not a writer. I'm just an arranger.
It's just a question of style.
Maybe, I sort of struggle a lot. I find it, particularly with recording, I find recording very difficult. Live concerts, I'm fairly confident about what I'm doing, but recording always confuses me.
You say that your preference on doing live concerts by now, so you don't have any desire in the near future of recording a new record with?
No, I record all the time. I'm just not very good at it. But I record, I'm very dissatisfied with it. And I was aware all my life that success came mainly from the mass media, which is you make a record and then the record company presses that record, makes that record available, and people all around the whole world, we would just drive for 20 minutes to the studio, or half an hour or whatever, and make the record. And then suddenly people in Singapore and Japan and Russia and everything are buying it. So if you want to really succeed, you have to do it through mass media. You can't do it through just doing a concert.
Yeah.
But as a musician and as a person, I'm always most comfortable on a stage, in much more so, and how it feels in the room on that night. And therefore, I don't think that when you switch on YouTube and you see a live concert, and my view is it's not live, it's on YouTube. It's only live when you're in with the group or the singer in the hall. That's the only time it's live. It's not live because you've recorded it. Once you record it and you control the volume and it's in your kitchen, it's not live anymore.
You can pause.
Well, you play it loud when the phone, when the phone rings, you turn the volume down. You can't do that in a concert.
Yeah. And the concert has something that is really different from the studio setting, because you do all the things in one take. You have one shot to do the song, and in the studio you repeat and make the things a little bit more. I wouldn't say this word, but I can think in other word now. Quite boring, I think, because you have to repeat keyboard overdubs or stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, but except that, one of the sad things, it's not sad, but that really a lot of live bands now are playing to computer click. So that, all the brass sections and the backing vocals are actually in the computer, and they're playing in time to a computer. So they're not playing live anymore totally. Half of what you're hearing in a lot of concerts are coming out through speakers that no one making sound, that no one on the stage is making that sound. Yeah.
That is really strange. I can't stand much of live music today, because it's all full of this thing called VS or properly playback, and it really kills all the experience.
Well,
because
I think that's right. I think that is very, very right. It sounds perfect, and you can make it sound perfect by that. But I think a concert to be live must be that some of it's imperfect. You get some of it wrong.
Yeah.
And then you can get some of it spectacularly right. But really, the reason that it's so bad like that is that the computers aren't very good. Because if the computers were any good, they'd be able to follow a live drummer. And you could do that with playing naturally with those sounds following the band or the group or the group of musicians.
No.
But in fact, because the computers aren't good enough to follow a live drummer, that everyone's doing it. One day, if computers are good enough to follow a live drummer, anything recording now to click and on tape would look as being peculiarly old-fashioned.
Yeah.
It's really because the machines aren't very good.
Yeah. It is a absolutely paradox, because they're doing the thing now thinking that is the epitome of the best technology, but it's really old-fashioned, is really dated.
In a sense, it will be old-fashioned one day. When the technology improves, it'll be old-fashioned. But there's a safety net. If you've got half of it on computers, and then there's a safety net. You know it's always going to sound good. I mean, I've done it. I've used it. And in the 80s, we did some recording, and we were recording to click because we had some African choirs on, and in order to get those African choirs coming through, and it sounded fantastic.
Yeah.
But it was successful, but it was rhythmically dead.
And there's a difference. The click back then was a tool for the music, not the opposite. So I think there's a difference on that. Some kind of technology as a tool to the music, to the live playing, and
yeah, no, but it no matter. No, you can't. With the moment you're having to play to click, you're in a prison. You can't use it as a tool because you have to play in time with click, click, click. Even if you're using it, a lot of people might say what you're saying. Oh, it's just a tool. And lots of musicians can play very well to click, and they're very, very good. They may be better than me playing to click, but you're still in a prison. And and even when we did it back then and we used African choirs, it was the only way to do it if you wanted the African choir. And I used it very little, and I did notice it just didn't really, it was perfect. It was perfect, and for a short while it was okay, but I wouldn't have wanted to do it for longer than that.
Yeah.
I think you could use it for short bits. I mean, I think there are ways to try and do it. And I've thought about that. I've thought about using it where you use it in short bits, you bring it in for a change of sound, and then you take it out again, and you're playing totally live. But I haven't bothered to do. And
I got the point now, because this thing is getting out of control, and it's really important to talk about it. And I was really eager to hear you talking about it because I heard some of your quotes in other interviews talking about this, and no one artist today, or very few artists manage to even thinking talking about that and criticize this. It's a sort of institutional thing in the
Well, yeah,
music.
that way they just
People,
conform. They're conforming to what the standard seems to be. Everyone's doing it; it must be okay. Well, perhaps it is okay, but for me, I mean, I did in 2005. I did a thing with an orchestra with a whole load of acts, and everyone used click for the orchestra to be in time, and I just refused. I said, if we're going to do it, we're not going to do that. So if you want us to do it, so everyone, and honestly, we just sounded so fresh compared to everybody else. Everyone's carefully playing in time, getting it right, everything's perfect, and then even it was just me and the singer Chris Thompson. And the rhythm section, everybody just felt, that like the prison had been taken away. That was in 2005. Anyway.
we were talking about technologies and about the thing that makes an imprisonment over the music. And I would like to go back to the music, especially the music that you've done. And you were talking about how do you not consider yourself as a great jazz player? But I have to disagree with that because I was hearing those records by Manfred Mann Chapter 3, and it has a different flavor from the original Manfred Mann band,
Yes.
and it has a lot of jazzier
Yes.
flavor. And I would like to ask about that period. What prompted you to form that band that time? Because those two albums are criminally underrated. I love those records. It has a spontaneity. It has that warm feeling on music, improvisation in studio, stuff like that.
Well, we had been a pop band, but we originally had been jazz musicians. Myself and Mike Hugg, we were the two guys who did it. And we were, by the end of the 1960s, we were very much a straight pop band. We're doing very, very catchy. We were very good at very catchy tunes. Fox on the Run, Ha Ha, said the clown. They're all cutesy tunes. We were very good at that. But I think it was time. It was so far. We somehow slowly, and a lot of this was my fault, slowly moved away from the blues bass that we had in the beginning into, well, we knew how to get a record into the charts, but nobody really liked the records for longer than 3 months. It was catchy to sing, people bought it. And we wanted to be taken, I suppose, more seriously, and we returned to our roots. I think personally we possibly overdid it a little bit because we had rules. We were going to write everything, and my partner Mike was a much better writer than me. We weren't going to have a guitar. We were going to write everything ourselves. I think we had too many rules to it, and I think they may be underrated and they're so on. But when you really listen to great jazz musicians, Miles Davis at his best, we really don't rate at all. I mean, in the world of the great musicians in jazz, we just don't. And that's not me being modest. I'm good as an arranger. I'm good as a keyboard player. I can't really compete with the really best jazz players, Errol Garner, Oscar Peterson. I mean, they're on a different planet.
I said that because the album is not a pure jazz thing, because it has some elements from avant-garde.
Oh, yes.
And it has do you consider that? I consider that, and I don't know if I agree with that. I see it's a sort of transition to what the Earth Band would do, especially in the first albums, because it has a more it has a quite complexity on that songs, because even when you have that gloomy sound and you have a lot of improvisations going on
Hmm.
it has some really intricate parts. It was difficult to rehearse to play that songs for looking back at it.
Well, let me say this. I don't listen to my, you're probably more familiar with what's on those records than I am. I can't listen to my own recordings. I keep thinking this should have been done better. Why did I do that? That needs more reverb. I don't think I'm a good record producer. Why did I do that? Maybe I had the speakers too loud in the studio. I keep hearing, so you know more about it than I do. I'm serious. You know, you've listened to it, and I can't answer authoritatively. You know, I can't answer properly because you know it better than me. Maybe if I listen to the chapter 3 albums, I might say, wow, this is amazing. What moody. I think it has a kind of mood to it, the whole thing. That, you know, and you're probably better at picking up on it than me. So I don't want to sound like I know about it. I haven't listened to it for years and years and years, for decades.
You have been a very critical. You're a very critical of yourself, uh,
Well,
because
I
I
mean,
perceive this, because you had a lot of you have a lot of critical image you from yourself. I perceive it.
well,
Would
maybe
you agree with that?
that's why I practice. That's why I struggle. I mean, I think it's astonishing that I managed to succeed. And
Yeah.
I think the only reason, at the end of the day, the only reason I succeeded, I keep coming to this, is that I used other people's writing as a means. So the genius in some of the songs and things aren't me writing them. It's the original creator was someone else, and I was able to change it, fiddle about with it, to turn it into something else. And I think I'm very good at that.
Yeah.
And if you spoke to me about arrangements and stuff, I would say I'm one of the better arrangers. I wouldn't be too critical about my skills at arranging and hearing a song completely different to the original. Sometimes I could hear it. You might play something, I could hear within seconds how it can be different. You do it slowly, you do it fast, do it like this. Maybe you put that behind it. I'm really good at that. And so I don't doubt that I can do that better than most people. And I'm also very good with a live band on a stage. When we do rehearsals, I'm much more comfortable saying, no, let's try it this way, try it that way, try different ways of doing things to find the very best way. I can sense how it is for an audience. I'm good at that. I just think with recording, you know, I'm somehow not quite as, so I don't want to be over modest here, you know, the big humble musician. I'm critical, you know, for reasons. I think I play some good stuff, and I think I sound different to other people, but I don't listen and I don't overrate it.
Yeah. And looking back at that time, what
But it's
point did
great
you
to
decide?
listen. Let me say this: it's great to talk to you because you're talking like I'm the great musician here. I'm feeling really good at this. You know, you're talking to me like I'm this big guy full of wisdom. So it's a really good feeling. Just by the way, you're making an old man very happy here.
But you are, man. And
Well, that's
I say, no, I have to say, what you, Chris Slade, Colin Patton, and Mick Rogers had done with Father of Day, Father of Night is pure genius. The original version of Bob Dylan, with all respect to Bob Dylan, I can hear that. You transformed that stuff in a proper song.
absolutely. No, that's me at my best. He's going Father of Black, Father of Night, and I can go Father of Black. I can hear it slowly. I can hear it totally different. That's exactly right. That's what I'm best at. You
Do
know,
you remember the act of picking that song? Do you remember the moment that you picked that song? Let's rearrange this tune. How it was the working process of creating, because you guys created a melody. You created a
well, the
proper
way
song.
I think immediately you heard it. It just sounds ridiculous. You thought Father of Black. And just straight away you can hear it's Father of, it has a kind of classical cathedral feeling about the lyrics and the words. And you can, I've always found it very easy to make music weird. It's, you know, it's the really difficult thing is to do what Taylor Swift does, where you do a pop song and it's really good writing, and yet it's very simple in some ways, and yet it's complex. To do weird things like the beginning of Father a Day, Father, you know, all that's kind of weird medieval, sort of almost gothic sort of thing. I find that quite easy to do. And so it was Father a Day, you know, it's a kind of churchy thing, even though Dylan at that time was not a Christian, I don't think. It's just been a bit weird. I don't find it difficult to be a bit weird.
It's for me, it's one of the best reworkings, because I don't like the word cover. I think it's too, I don't know. And you had one of the best recordings, reworkings ever made, because it has, you transformed from everything of the original song. I compare it to, in a certain extent, to Joe Cocker's version of With Little Help from My Friends.
Yeah.
Anyone could play this song today, play Joe Cocker's arrangements, with all respect to Sgt. Pepper's version, but very few persons, except for, of course, Ringo Starr does it with the original arrangement from that album. It really make a different song from a pre-existent song. It's a sort of paradox that is interesting.
Well, if the original material is good, I mean, generally speaking, I have chosen to do songs that are not in their or not that you feel the definitive version, isn't it? I wouldn't do an Elton John song, because his writing and the way he's done it, he's like done the definitive version already. There's nowhere to go. But if you listen to, say, Father of Day, you know, it's so obvious. This is the word is idiosyncratic. I don't know, you know, it's a strange way of doing it. And you can, in this and also with Blinded by the Light, in this very personal Bruce Springsteen style of doing it, there is a straight pop song. You know, there's a very straight song. Just often, with Father a Day, I'm straightening it out, actually. I'm making it into a kind of pop song from something that's very personal and very odd. So I don't think it's the same as Joe Cocker made the definitive record. I mean, he's just great singer and made a great record. But the Beatles already had done many of their things of the definitive versions. The ones that I've picked up are very odd. You know, if you listen to, I did a track called Davy's on the Road Again. And if you listen to that and try and find the original by John, God, I've forgotten his name. But you find the original of Davy's on the Road Again. I mean, you cannot believe it's the same record.
Yeah. It has, you were talking about the Beatles, and do you have any Beatles song that you would, imagine yourself in a past, or even now, that you would like to rework, or well, I think it would be interesting. I
think I did a thing. I did Bulldog at one time. I did a track of theirs called Bulldog. The Beatles have just done stuff so well, and everybody knows it so well, most of it. You're not going to find undiscovered great records there. I try to find things that everybody doesn't know already. Unless you're doing something, I did an album, I think, Lone Ranger, where I took songs that everybody knew really well as a challenge, We Will Rock You and things like that, and changed them completely. I don't know whether I did that successfully, probably not. But that was it. But if everybody knows the original, then, you know, sometimes they just aren't capable. I don't know, you just sort of think, well, the original's better. I mean, I'll give you an example of something. When you're recording or doing your final mix, you having committed to say that this is now a recording, you might have another record to compare it with from somebody else, and to see that if yours came on the radio as it used to be, it's now all streaming, that your recording would come after somebody else's, that you're technically of a high enough standard. And I think that's a really good thing to do, because you forget how good the other record may sound. But when I did an album called Somewhere in Africa, I used some of Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, as a guideline. And the moment it came on, I just felt depressed because theirs was so much better than what I was doing. So I then realized I don't know what point I'm making here, but I did realize then that you should get a record that sounds technically good, but one you don't like. Just like that. So you don't just get depressed and you can't record. But really, Dark Side of the Moon was so good, and what I was doing just didn't sound as good. And
you were talking now about the Dark Side of the Moon, and I would like to go back and activate your memories from that period, 1973, or this period. What point did you decide to end Chapter 3 and form properly the Earth Band? When you got to know the other guys, Mick, Chris, Slade, Colin Patton, and from that first lineup?
Well, I don't really know. I think that Chapter 3 was failing. We hadn't had any successful records. It also is an economic unit. There's 5 guys. There's 10 people traveling, 10 people in hotel rooms. And at some point, I just think I thought this is going nowhere, and I thought I should just do something without any overreaction against pop music, which I think Chapter 3 was in a way. I mean, I'm very proud that we did it, by the way. Because we weren't thinking about success or failure. We just were trying to do good music at the time. But I just thought I should do whatever I feel like at any time. And myself and Mike Hugg, I have a lot of respect for, and he's a lovely guy. I just felt we'd come to an end, and I wanted to do it differently. I don't know how I met Mick. Chris Slade had done a drum session at some point for Manfred Mann, Chapter 3. And I asked him if he knew a bass player, and he knew Colin. He said, I played with this guy the other week. It seemed to work out well. So I don't know, I contacted the people and let's start playing and see what happens.
And it happened very, very good. And a milestone of this first phase of the group, at least for me, was Soul of Fire. And do you remember the conception of this album? Because I heard in some sources, but I don't know if it's actually true, that after the reworking that you guys had done of Joybringer, it was going originally entirely inspired by the Planet Suite by Gustav Holst. It was true, or it was an idea that never...
No, Mick Rogers came to me and said, how about doing this song I used to do in Australia called Make Your Stash? Now, Make Your Stash is like a drug. They put druggy lyrics to it, your stash of drugs. Make your stash. Da, 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 da. I mean, I thought, and I said to Mick, and I listened to the original, and I realized it was called Bringer of Jupiter, Bringer of Joy. And it just seemed obvious that, Jupiter, Bringer of Joy is if you're trying to make a commercial record for the market, you want people to play this better than Make Your Stash. I bring joy. So I thought, why don't we do I Bring Joy? So, I mean, that's how it happened. But of course, I didn't know it, but Mick, and somehow in Australia, because it's where he worked for many years, had found the song, or somebody he knew had found that. And then we used it and obviously changed it and put some instrumental sections in and stuff. So it was, it came directly from Planet Suite, yes. But I didn't know it. I didn't know that when he first played it to me.
Oh, yeah. It was, I always this correlation was apparent, but I didn't know it was accidental, it was proposed, but anyway. And afterwards, you released Nightingales and Bombers, and it has one of the landmarks of in terms of songs of the Earth Band, which was a Spirit in the Night. And Bruce Springsteen was back then starting to becoming a huge name of the rock. He wasn't that big name back then. And how involved the idea of reworking Spirits in the Night? One of my favorite versions of the Earth Band.
Well, Spirits in the Night, that's a Springsteen song, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, it's not Bob Dylan. We were touring America, and we played Philadelphia a couple of times, and we used to be quite successful in that area in the States. We weren't successful at that time in America, but somehow the records have been played in it's very regional American radio at that time, and we did quite well in Pennsylvania. And one of the guys at the radio station, a guy called Ed Sharkey, I don't know how you spell it, I think he's Polish, strange spelling, came to me and said, you ought to get this guy, Bruce Springsteen's a good songwriter. And I always listen to people when they did that, because I'm always looking for good songs, good material to use. So I bought the album, which is Springsteen's first album, and he was successful he was starting to do well in America. And yes, so I suppose, yeah, Spirits in the Night was one of the songs on the first Bruce Springsteen album. I did a number of songs from that. Blinded by the Light came from that. For You came from that as well.
Yeah. And you were talking about Blinded by the Light, and next came Roaring Silence, and with it occurred a sort of moment of new lineup for the band. And how was this transition period, the recording of this record? Because Mick left and entered Chris Thompson. How he was the connection? How the connection happened between you and Chris? And
well, Mick Rogers was sort of didn't like some of the way we were playing. He was very much into, I mean, I'm working with him now, I'm not telling any stories. He was very much into Frank Zappa, and very, and and we were more of a straight rock group than certainly Frank Zappa, great musicians and very complex music. And Mick wanted to do that, and he was becoming more and more unhappy, and he was letting it show. So, and so he became, we felt, the others of us felt it became very difficult to work with him, because he was dissatisfied with everything we were doing. So, we sort of terminated his employment, I suppose. And then Chris Thompson was the first, was one of the few people who were, he's a great singer, Chris, at the time. And then he joined, I suppose we let the work, I can't remember exactly how it happened. But what was very funny, and I don't know whether this is not a funny conversation, but Mick was going on and on about Frank Zappa, all the time talking about Frank Zappa. And so we decided we had to get rid of Mick. And then on the first day where Chris Thompson turned up at the studio, he obviously was thinking at home before he came what to wear. And he'd seen pictures of me looking like a weird out sort of druggie on the, which I'm definitely not. And he thought, what's the cool thing to wear to turn up to the audition? And we opened the door of the studio, and Chris walked in wearing a Frank Zappa T-shirt, thinking it's the right. Yeah, trying to wear the right, sort of send the right signal out. It's totally the wrong T-shirt to wear. Very funny.
I really like, I think it's one of the landmarks of the Earth Band during a huge part of the discography was his voice. I love his bluesy voice. He has a really remarkable voice. When I hear 2 seconds of any song with him singing, I immediately know that it's Chris Thompson because
No,
he's
it's absolutely right. And he almost everything he did sounded really good.
yeah.
Yeah, no, he was very good.
Listening to the first albums, you have this more sort of complex music or more technical in a little bit of way going on happening in a certain way. I don't know if I agree with that. While from the Roaring Silence onwards, I find the band more stripped back in some arrangements. The thing were not so technical. I think it was an influence of the departure of the Mick, but it was more elaborate, I think, in production and overdubs. And I would like to ask, did the way you play it and the band rearranged the songs that already existed on the albums, on the first albums, change it from these first records in relation to the other ones from
It's really difficult
Rolling Silence onwards?
talking to people and talking about the complexity and how important it was and how significant. and I noticed that some of the guys, I won't say who, stood there and loved the idea that yes, it was significant. Yes, what we did was yes. And I have to tell you, with me at all times, there's no thought process going on. We're going to do this. We're going to make it like, I just think what works well, what sounds good.
Yeah.
There's no, I mean, I'm glad to hear it sounding more significant when you talk about it. And I don't mean to
Effortlessly.
at all times, you just think what works. Does this work? Does that make the song? Also, this music, the song has to be good. You can do great arrangements. It doesn't fit the damn song. And that happens a lot with me, you know. Even now I've been struggling with something where you go, and then you put the song on top, it doesn't work. And you think, God, that's a great riff, but it doesn't work with the song. So at all times, I'm just struggling, think, well, what works best? What feels good? What gives you a good feeling here? I'm not thinking it through in the way that it sounds. Well, these are more complex. And somehow you're just rolling with the influences. Maybe you hear other people on radio. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know when it sounds good and when it doesn't. And sometimes I even get confused about that. The thing about music is you have to understand this, is if you take, say, Imagine by John Lennon, you know exactly what it means because he's writing lyrics to it. If you go along and take a piece of music by Bach where there's no words, that music can be very beautiful, but you don't know what it is. It sounds good. You don't know what it is because there aren't any words. And the feeling in music, the feeling in instrumental music, the best of Miles Davis, there's no words there. So you can't, I can't explain. There's a kind of feeling you're listening for, and it's a musical feeling. It's not I mean, when you put lyrics on, then of course it means this and it means that. But when you take, I'm not that concerned with that aspect. If it feels good and the groove is as good as you can get it or whatever, and it works, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I don't know what makes things work. Very, very often, I mean, I'll give you an example. You had Davies on the Road Again. Now, there were two ways to do that. You could either do it with straight timing. Davies on the road again. We're in different, it's sort of more rocky. Davies on, or you can go with dotted timing. Davies on the road again. And I spent forever. Everything in me wanted to do the rock version. Davies on. I wanted to do that. Everything in me wanted to do that. But something about Davies on somehow seemed to work. And in the end, I did it with the dotted timing, the sort of, instead of, it was against my instinct, but I just thought that actually works better for the song. So I went against what I would have wanted to be a more rock record. and it was the slightly prettier record, because that just seemed to work better for the song. So sometimes I'm not doing what I want to think, yeah, that would be great, but the song doesn't somehow fit. The pop part of it, the part that's straight pop music, doesn't work.
Yeah, this is quite interesting take, because it has a difference of what I want put into the song and what the song needs. And
well, yes, there's a story about the Eagles. Somebody told me that they, at the beginning, in early days, at some point, they wanted to be a rock group, and they were thinking that. And in between the recordings, I think Glyn Johns was the producer, an English producer, and in the gaps between the recording, they'd often just sit in the corridor and sing songs that they just enjoyed doing. And Glyn Johns, then the album wasn't going that well, and he said, why don't we just do what you guys are doing in the corridor, you know, when we're not recording? Let's do some of that stuff. And that became the Eagles sound, you know.
Yeah.
So what they wanted to do, being more of a rock band, they ended up being a country rock band. And that's where the big success lay, because it just worked better. It was more natural for them. So it's interesting. Sometimes what you want to do, if it doesn't work as well, then you must do the thing that works well, you know.
Yeah. And going back to the Rolling Silence days, you were, of course, the album included Blinded by the Light, which was a huge hit. I was reading other interviews that you didn't expect it to be a hit. And how was the process of recording and the creating those songs? And I love that keyboard intro. You used their pedal. How was the effect? Intro was inspired. You say that you was inspired by Dreamer, by Supertramp.
Yes. Intro. I can do an hour-long story at a keyboard about the making of Blinded by the Light. In order to do my own arrangements, I learn the original, and then I stop listening to the original, because if you keep listening to Bruce Springsteen's version, I would never have made the record that I did. So I had to get rid of that. So I didn't listen to the Bruce Springsteen thing, and I got the words wrong. He had cut loose like a deuce for some reason or other. I wrapped up like a douche. It all went wrong. I got the wrong lyrics. I used the wrong chords. And, you know, I think Springsteen's chords and the melody's slightly different to Springsteen.
Yeah.
If I'd listened to the original, I wouldn't have made the record I made. And I made it by accident to some extent. I spent a very long time. It started off that it would be quite nice to do the chorus instead of big, small, so that the blinded, big noise, blinded by the thing, and it empties out. And we had a very elaborate and complex record, but I knew that the chorus line, with that noise and the big sweep and all that was a good bit to do. And it was very, very difficult to make that quite complex album track, which we never released. Even the album track we used isn't the same one we had. And to try and simplify that record into the record we eventually made. So it was, I had all sorts of mistakes were made, but in the end, it sort of worked in the way that it did. But also, I don't know why I ended up with wrapped up instead of cut loose like a. And then comes to the word deuce. Springsteen had written deuce, wrapped up, cut loose like a deuce, and he meant a car, a little deuce coupe or something. Cars used to be called that. We had a technical error in the studio where all the S's went to so it sounded wrapped up like a douche. And everybody thought this was a vaginal douche when women were having periods. It sounded a bit like douche. And the record company, one day, Warner Brothers in America, asked me to change douche to deuce. because the Southern Religious Bible Belt radio stations didn't want to play the record because they thought it was to do with women's body parts. And so I said, well, okay, I'll try. It's hard to explain. It was to do with angle of tape heads, whether it's straight or slight. I could get wrapped up like a deuce, but all the cymbals went wrong and the rest of the record all sounded wrong. So I said I couldn't do it. And then eventually when the record's #1 in America, people are saying, it got to #1 because everybody's talking about whether it's douche or deuce. And Bruce Springsteen himself refers to it. He says, well, it's about, he doesn't like it because we changed it from cut loose like a deuce to wrapped up like a douche. It's just basically, I made a mistake, wrapped up. I can't figure out where I got that from. And douche was a mistake that landed up sounding like deuce. So it was just, it's just a series of mistakes that somehow worked out.
Yes, and really worked out in a way. And that intro of the keyboard,
yes,
effect of the pedal, and what pedal do you use it? What's effect that you use it? It was a flanger or it was a Leslie speaker?
Well, no, it was simply, I don't know. I mean, it may have been. It's a Fender Rhodes piano.
Oh.
And if you listen to it carefully, we never started like that. You'll find that the opening note is missing. It doesn't go ding, 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 ding. It goes ding, ding. It starts one beat later because we had to cut it. We got it from a chorus. It was never the intro of the original record.
Oh,
so we had to edit, and the very beginning is slightly wrong. Because if you'd started at the beginning, you would have had a big bang and it didn't sound right. Well, I think it's a Fender Rhodes through a phaser or flanger or something, but it's a straight keyboard. It wasn't any big adventurous thing. I suppose we put it through, so I can't remember.
Yeah. To enter a phase that you really like from previous interviews and quotes that you had said, which was about a record which was somewhere in Africa, one of my favorites from Earth Band. And that album really kind of premiered the world music sort of sound in the mass media and the album media. Way before Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, other artists had managed to do. And this album has a lot of traditional African music influence on the arrangements and even the proper songs. And where did this homage direction, I see it in a certain way of this thing on the album, had come after the more traditional album previous from this period?
It was. I thought. Well, I don't like people. The album was sort of in a sense a political album because there's a map of Africa we're talking about, and everything is give details and everything's about African. The lyric. I mean I've forgotten Sikulele Africa, that kind of you're using the words of what became the national anthem when apartheid was over, and Aware To and Power and all that stuff. So it was sort of political album, but I really, all the time, I felt uncomfortable about that because I don't like people preaching. You're a musician and now you're telling other people what to think. And there's something unpleasant about that and self-regarding that I don't like. But I thought, well, I actually come from South Africa. And if anyone's entitled to do it, I am. But because it actually is part of my life, it wasn't something. And also, I never went along and tried to lecture on a concert and tell people, And all the time working with the band, I always said, this has to work as music. It mustn't just be a political statement. It must work as music. Does it work as music? And I hope that it did. I'm not sure. I mean, the album I like is plains music, which was done with some African guys in South Africa. But so, I mean, but I have to say, I think it's not a question of who did it first. Paul Simon made a great record in Graceland, which is way, way better than Somewhere in Africa. And, you know, and he deservedly had this huge worldwide hit with it. It was a wonderful, wonderful record. And he avoided all political things altogether. That's also good. I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was a great, great album, Graceland. And I don't, you know, I may have done it first, and I'm off. But I grew up there, so I did it. I don't, you know, happen to do it first. It's just accident of history.
And one of the most memorable tracks from that period, this period, was Africa Suite. Do you remember the process of composing this track? Because it's really a band track. It's not it's not from outside songwriters, and I love the constructing of the suite, and it has that traditional African flavor mixed it with the band's traditional sound. Do you remember?
I remember thinking that I've got to go into a room with some African singers, and I'm the white guy, and I've got to tell them to sing about Africa. You know, it's just sort of, I remember thinking that's a really strange kind of, you know, how do I do this? How do I tell these guys how to sing about their lives, which is not my life? I mean, I lived a privileged life. Anyone says aware of your white privilege, I was very aware of it in South Africa, couldn't be more aware. Then I went to England, so I've never lived this life, and I'm telling them what to sing about their own lives. And that's why the opening line is, it's not for me to say to you what you must do. If you listen to the song, I think that's the opening one. People, brothers and sisters of Africa, it's not for me to say to you what you must do. So that was my first line to get out of this thing that I'm the sort of honky whitey coming in and telling them how to sing about their own lives and what it's all about. That's the only thing I remember. And I think when I listen back, my only problem is that I feel that I put the African choir too loud all the time. It was always too loud because I was trying to, I liked in the studio, where to, and everything is no, KwaZulu. It was all too loud. So that's why I can't listen to music that I've done. I just think that should have been quieter.
Yeah. And this period this album has Redemption Song and Demolition Man. And I've seen reports that you and the other guys were a big fan of the work. You were aware of the work of the Police, Bob Marley, other artists, of course. And after a curiosity that I had, after Blinded became a hit, did any artists start sending to you their records to record?
None, not particularly. It's before that, in the 60s, publishers would often contact us and send songs through. It wasn't particularly after Blinded that happened. It happened in the 1960s.
Oh yeah. You were talking about your favorite record, which was Plains Music. And do you have favorite compositions, favorite songs from the Earth Band, songs that you most like and stuff like that?
I can't answer that because I don't listen to them.
No.
So I think if I listen through them, I might find it. Sorry?
On stage, do you have a favorite one or favorite one?
On stage, I mean, I like everything we do on stage, really. And it's just a question every night, do you play this well enough? I mean, the thing on stage that's nicest for me to play and that I play best is Martha's Madman, probably, because there's lots of space and I can play in that space. And the volume of the band is less, so I'm not fighting against guitars and basses, everybody banging loud. Yeah. And I often try and say when it becomes more exciting, it doesn't have to get louder, you know. And the general tendency we have is, as in terms of live sound, is to I try and, if Mick is playing solos and things, I try and play as little as possible. I almost, when a guitar solo happens, I almost, most of the time, a lot of the time, leave it as if it's a guitar trio, so that you can hear the sound clearly. And my big trick as a live keyboard player, and a lot of players should learn that, there's one action you should learn, and that is to fold your arms and get off the bloody keyboard when someone else is playing.
Yeah.
You know, don't think that every note you play is helping. Sometimes you're just clouding the sound. If more players were doing what I'm doing now, just step back and stop playing when the other guys play, it'd actually be better, or play at half the volume.
Yeah.
But everyone
Way
tries
better.
to play. Yeah, and the sound out front then is very clear. And so when Mick plays, and sometimes, you know, and when I play, a lot of the time he stops and plays very, very little. So there's this absolute clarity. You can't see that by looking at it online, because online it often looks better when it's recorded that everybody plays loud. But in a concert, we often we get out of each other's way. But yes, I mean, probably Martha's Madman for me personally. But anything that grooves and has the right feeling rhythmically, you can play forever and don't get tired of it.
Yeah. About shows, you highlighted that the real deal for you is live concerts, live atmosphere. And I would like to ask, what most memorable, remarkable concerts from the Earth Band's career? I ask it because you were one of the first bands to play in the 80s in the Iron Curtain, in Budapest.
That was in the 60s.
Oh, the Earth Band, actually, I was talking about.
No, the 60s band played in 1965.
Oh, yeah.
in Czechoslovakia, yeah, behind the Iron Curtain.
How was that experience and back then? I was curious about that. I didn't know. I thought that your first visit to was in the 80s.
We were the first Western pop band to ever play behind the Iron Curtain in 1965 in Prague and Bratislava. And it's enough it has an enormous impact, because you realize that political philosophies with very good words can land up in terrible oppression and terror.
Yeah.
You know, even though all the words are good, we're all going to share this, we're all going to do that, but unless you can kick the butt. And we stayed in a hotel where we were on the 4th floor or 6th floor, and the guests, this is the workers' paradise, the guests weren't allowed to use the elevator. There was a key to get into the elevator, and only the staff for cleaning the hotel were able to use the elevator. You had to carry your own bags up 6 flights of stairs. So that was the workers' paradise, that you couldn't, you know. And I saw people being taken out by the security police because they stood up in their seat clapping their hands at a concert. And I saw a guy pissing himself with fear and terror as the security police took him out the hall, you know.
Yeah. In the Earth Band, do you have remarkable concerts?
No, I mean, to be honest, any night can be remarkable if the feeling is good. I don't think there's any special event and sort of, you know, I can't go down that road. I'm not sure. The other night we played and there was a good groove, and it was in a small place in Switzerland, and it was as good as anything I've done, you know. So
one thing that talking about these changing lineups, and you have a constant thing on Earth Band, which was collaborated not only with Earth Band but throughout your whole career, and you collaborated with extraordinary and really remarkable lead vocalists: Mike Tabo, Mike Hugg, Mick Rogers, Chris Thompson, Noel McCullough, extraordinary lead singer, Peter Cox, and now Robert Hart. What do you think this is essential to a lead vocalist to sing with you?
Well, first of all, the most important single thing is that they're in the same town as the rest of the guys on the night of the gig. So there's the odd person, I won't say, there's only one person who you couldn't rely on to be there. So the important thing isn't being in tune, anything, is you've got to actually turn up. So that's the sort of joke, but it's also true. I don't know. It's very, very difficult because most singers are singing songs that they have a hand in writing. When you're working with me, you're always singing songs that other people wrote. And some voices, some guys maybe, so sometimes there are people who make great records and wonderful things. They're not great singers, but they become great records because the singer wrote for his own voice. So for us, the singer has to be able to sing other songs and still make it work. And very often songs that the audience heard another singer do, and now you're turning up and hearing this guy sing. So it's really difficult. I don't know. You're just looking for the most versatile. It sort of works. I'm not sure what the ingredient is. It just, you know it when you hear it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, if, for example, would be Noel McCullough, who is a great singer, actually. And he sounded completely different to Chris, but on the stage, he always made it work. And even though he sounded different, it worked because he was so good. But I never asked him to sing the song For You. And Robert Hart sings For You. I didn't think Noel's voice would be good for You. That's a Springsteen song we do, I Can Be You. So sometimes voices fit, and, you know, they've got to... Someone working with us now has to be able to sing Blinded by the Light or Davies on the Road Again in a way that the audience will accept that enough of the feeling of the original record is there, even though this sounds different, it's another guy. So it's not just a good singer, it's a guy who the audience will accept that he can sing. You can't have a great singer who can't sing, sounds wrong when he sings Blinded by the Light.
Yeah.
Because he didn't, you know, because the years have gone by, we don't have the original guy there. So it's really, it's complex. It's a complex question. I don't actually know.
Yeah. And you see that Noel McCullough and Chris Thompson distinctions, and there was a short living lineup in the 90s with both singing. Why didn't it last very much?
With who?
With Noel and Chris singing.
Oh, with both of them together.
Yeah, it was in 19.
Yes, that was... I mean, that probably was the best vocal lineup ever because, you know, they were both really good singers and they sang together and they sang opposite each other. No, that was a very, very good combination of lead singers on stage. Ridiculous. Well, he wanted to leave to do a band called Night, which he recorded something in America. He decided to leave.
Oh, yeah.
So ask him.
my final two questions in this interview, and...
Are you sure this is the final two?
Yes, this is the final two.
Okay.
And this whole interview was about your work as an artist. And I would like to ask, what do you listen to today beyond Taylor Swift? I know that you're a fan of Taylor Swift.
I'm a fan of the best of hers, not a fan of everything.
Oh.
I'm a great fan of the best, yes. The best of her. Anyway, what do I listen to?
Yeah.
I like some very simple. I like J.J. Cale. I like Taj Mahal. And Keb Mo together, and Keb Mo on his own. But I don't listen to much music. I do music all day long. I really don't want to, when I stop doing it, to be listening to music again. So I listen to very little music.
Oh.
But I love the feeling in the, I love the feeling in the best simple blues players. And by that I mean modern players. Like, I love Keb Mo.
Is extraordinary.
And I hear other people and I occasionally listen. I don't hear much. Yeah, and on YouTube I see some of the guys who are very good at playing and funky stuff. And some of them are great players. I don't know whether they make great music, but you look at them playing for a minute and a half on YouTube, and they really seem remarkable. But I'm not sure whether they could do a whole gig, those guys. But they are very good. But I don't seek out. I listen to people who are advising you how to play keyboards, and sometimes you get people who can't play properly, but they actually say something that's very useful. So I try and learn. There's an awful lot of people offering advice and things to practice. I do that. I don't listen to much music.
Yeah. And you sit at Taylor Swift, and you are at least aware in some extent to the today's music. There's no one other artist beyond her from these days, from this new generation that you like to listen, from pop music or for rock.
Well, I like the best of Billie Eilish as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but the best of it, not all of it, but I like the best of it. I think the problem is I hear a lot of music. I don't listen a lot, but when I do hear it, I do hear a lot of music that seems to have no energy at all. It all just seems to be chill out, sort of. So there's an awful lot of very bland, very ordinary. It doesn't even offend me. It just sounds like wallpaper, some of it. So there's a lot of stuff I don't like. So you might read about somebody, wow, this person's got this attitude and they've got that. And you've got some girl with lots of attitude spitting out at you, but she's not really spitting. And it all sounds very limp and very tired. So there's a lot of records. When I do occasionally put up and try and just see what's going around, it doesn't offend me anymore. 10 years ago, in the past, there were music I really didn't like. Now there's stuff that doesn't even offend me. It just sounds limp.
Yeah. If you could define the final question, if you could define Earth Band and yourself as a keyboardist, as a arranger, in one sentence of word, what would it be?
Say this. I could say this. I tell you what music is. Music is, in a sense, to me and to many musicians,
okay,
it's not something that people say, oh, you get great pleasure out of it, you do this, you do that. It's more like breathing. You don't really get pleasure out of breathing. You just breathe all day long.
Yeah.
But if you stop breathing, you die. So it's a bit like that. I think if I wasn't doing anything musical, something in me would die. I don't go around all day thinking, oh, isn't this great, or I feel that, or I'm getting such great feeling. I don't know. Sometimes on gigs, concerts, you think, well, this is me perfectly. This is me. But most of the time, it's something you kind of take for granted, and it's your job. You get up in the morning, and I do it most of the day on most days. But if I didn't do it, I think it would be very difficult for me.
Yeah. And
no, you
thank you so much for the
okay.
interview. I'm really honored to welcome you here.
And all the questions were very good and very knowledgeable.
And thank you. I'm really happy to having the chance to talk with you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye, Manfred.
Bye.